The Young Turks did a segment on Lindsey Graham yesterday and how big of a warmonger he is. And to sum it up, he basically said that you can't trust Iranians. He said it in a broad way. He meant it in a broad way. Yeah, the idea is you can't trust all Iranians. And the idea also is you can't trust the nuclear deal, even though the nuclear deal isn't based on trust, it's based on verification. So, yeah, he's using that argument to essentially be a war hawk, and he's trying to tank peace. And he is being a bigot. It's fairly clear. I don't think anybody's surprised by the idea that Lindsey Graham is a bigot. So he makes this point, Lindsey does, in a rather buffoonish way, as expected. But in the midst of the conversation on this issue, Cenk made a side point about new atheists that I'm going to take issue with.
It's also the defense contractors here in the U.S. who want more and more war, and so his answer is, by definition, you cannot trust an Iranian, so I would never trust any peace treaty that Obama or anybody made with the Iranians, so we have no other choice. We must go to war because they're all bad people. Now, they have bad intent. Now, look, as I saw the last part of this, that's part of my problem with the new atheists, right, is that they support that kind of ideology. You know, oh, they're the master, there used to be, like this straight out of the new atheist talking points, right? Oh, the Nazis used to talk about a master race, and Islam talks about a master religion. I got bad news for you guys. All the religions think they're the master religion. There's no religion who thinks, hey, I probably come in third or fourth. Like I put the Mormons above me, obviously, the Amish, and then us, right?
Buddhists typically seem pretty humble.
Right. So this whole idea that Islam views itself as the master religion, I say, of course, all the religions do. What do you think about the Christians? And then, of course, we had George Bush, who said that he wanted to invade Iraq because Gog and Magog were going to come out of Iraq, right? And all these biblical references and Christian ideology to back up his wars, right? So when I see this guy saying, no, they're all liars and cheats, and all they care about is religion, I see a lot of projection, and I see a guy who is desperate to go to war. He thinks war is the only answer.
All right, so first things first, I agree with the criticism of Lindsey Graham. In fact, we did a segment on the same video where I made similar points, and I don't take any issue with any of that. And if you watch the rest of the video, I'll co-sign the rest of what they said in their discussion. But the problem, I think, is lumping in new atheists with idiot Republicans like Lindsey Graham, because I don't think that's fair. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some new atheists that he might be able to individually point to on Twitter who are assholes to him that might actually fit the description of what he's saying. That doesn't mean that those people don't exist. In fact, I'm sure that those people do exist. But to just use the term new atheist and say, well, this is the problem with new atheist thinking, they think X, that's actually really broad, generalized thinking, and it's kind of guilty of the same thing that he accuses other people of doing with Islam and with Muslims. You know, oftentimes you hear from people, and sometimes rightfully so, they say, look, stop lumping in moderate Muslims with extremists and making it seem like they're all the same. You shouldn't do that. That's gross thinking, that's sloppy thinking, and that's unfair to the people who are more moderate. By the same token, I think the same thing is true of the new atheist community. In fact, I would argue the overwhelming majority of the new atheist community do not agree with Lindsey Graham or any ideology he has, especially on something like foreign policy. Because here's the thing, man, all new atheism is this. You ready? Here, I'll define it for you. Atheism with a voice. That's it. It's atheism that's willing to talk about its own atheism. It's an atheist who says, hey, look, here's why I am an atheist, and here's why I think you might want to consider being an atheist. I'm going to lay out my case for you and use logic, and then you determine whether or not you think I'm making sense. It's, you know how, Christians, we can evangelize, or Muslims can evangelize. They're allowed to, scream about their religion from the rooftop, and everybody says, oh, they're just advocating for their beliefs. I don't see what the problem is. For some reason, when atheists do it, everybody goes, oh, they're intolerant, and they're loud, and they're bigoted, and how dare they view everybody else as the extremists? No, what they're doing is they're just arguing for their position like anybody else would argue for their position, and so far as they actually believe it. So that's all new atheism is. So New Atheism is, defined as that, but also it's the idea that it's the brand of atheism, I should say, that's put forth by people like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Bill Maher and Christopher Hitchens and Daniel Dennett and Penn Jillette. Those are basically, like I just listed off right there. That's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the 6, main new atheists. If you talk to people and mention new atheism, that's who comes to mind. And that's another understanding of it or definition of it. It's the particular brand of atheism pushed by those people. Well, Cenk, if you look at the beliefs of those people, or how many did I say? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? I guess 6. If you look at the beliefs of those people, only 1 out of 6 of them was, for example, for the Iraq War. That would be Christopher Hitchens. The rest of them were not for it. So this perception of new atheists, like they're just conservatives who've slapped the label of atheist on themselves and they're this new brand of atheists called new atheists, that's not correct. And to further prove my point here, I would just tell anybody who might be in that camp still, just read their books. Just read all the books of the New Atheists. I've read almost all of the books of the New Atheists. I've read The God Delusion from Richard Dawkins. I've read End of Faith from Sam Harris and Letter to a Christian Nation from Sam Harris. I've obviously listened a lot to Bill Maher. I've read Hitchens. What's his called? God is Not Great, I think. I've never read Dennett, and I've heard Penn Jillette talk a bunch. And are there some links between all the different ones here on policy? Sure, there are some things that most of them agree on, but there's also policy differences. So New Atheism isn't tied into any political ideology or foreign policy ideology. Again, New Atheism is just the idea that if you're an atheist, you should talk about your atheism and try to spread the idea of atheism. And if only one of the 6, new atheists or most prominent new atheists are pro-war, you can't say that, that's just how they are. They are pro-war, like conservatives, by and large, are pro-war. My whole point is that if you break it down statistically, right? Okay, when it comes to who's pro-war, yes, it would be a majority of conservatives and Republicans who are more likely to be pro-war. When you look at liberals, it's much less. The New Atheist community is much more in line with liberal beliefs. And I think, it's important to bring that up and to remember there's a big difference between conservative douchebags like Lindsey Graham and new atheists. By the way, that doesn't mean that you can't pick out specific policies that specific new atheists believe and say, I disagree with this, and I disagree with this, and I disagree with this, and here's why. In fact, I agree with doing that, and I do it all the time. But the thing is, you can't use this broad attack against them because the broad attack isn't correct. It's not true. So if you want to get specific here, okay, so I disagree with Sam Harris doing this philosophizing on torture. And so he said, it should be illegal. He says that. But then he says, well, in a ticking time bomb scenario, you can see how philosophically and intellectually it could be justified. Disagree. You become the bad guy when you do that. You become the devil you're trying to avoid when you do that. You shouldn't even entertain that conversation philosophically because it's a dumb conversation to have. There is such thing as a principled objection to something, and you should have a principled objection to torture. So yeah, I'm against Sam Harris on that point. I'm against Sam Harris on the issue of Israel-Palestine. I'm against Christopher Hitchens on the issue of the Iraq War. You can pick out individual topics and disagree with people without saying, this is why I'm mad at the X community, the new atheist community. And unfortunately, I think there's a little bit too much lumping going on here.